everyone, and welcome to Good Nightmare, a podcast where today we'll be exploring a fairy tale that I'm personally kind of unfamiliar with. Before we get started, you may have noticed that on my Instagram I've started doing kind of little tiny snippets of cases where I'll post some unusual historical happenings. So be sure to follow me on there to get a little bit of extra content. Today's episode is about the Snow Queen. Like I said, the Snow Queen is a tale that I'm actually quite unfamiliar with. Aside from seeing her represented in the Narnia film, which stayed very true to the original tale as far as I can remember, this podcast is another listener suggestion. Thank you to everyone who's recommended topics so far. They keep me going when my brain just does not want to work with me. The Snow Queen was written by our good friend Hans Christian Andersen and was originally published in 1844. It's one of Andersen's longer tales and is actually told in 7 parts. The story in all is the tale of the struggle between good and evil. The story begins when the devil comes to Earth disguised as a troll. He carries with him a mirror that distorts reflections and turns them into visions of badness and evil. A person's worst traits are all that is reflected when someone peers into the mirror, or once beautiful and lush landscapes appear as cold and dank as boiled spinach. The devil was a headmaster at a school for trolls, and he recruited his fellow trolls to help him play a trick on God and the angels by bringing the mirror to heaven. He had hoped to make fools of them all, by changing all their innocence and beauty into visions of evil and ugliness. The devil was out of luck, however. As the higher the mirror rose, the more it began to laugh and shake, until suddenly it burst and shattered into millions of pieces no larger than grains of sand, and settled all over the earth. Years later, we learn of 2 close friends, Kai and Gerda, who lived so close that you could travel from one home to the next simply by jumping over the house's gutters. Kai and Gerda were raised so that they became as close as siblings. They would often spend days together, tending a rose garden in a window box that they'd built together. The roses were such a special part of Gerda and Kai's friendship that roses always served as a reminder to Gerda of her love for Kai. The two would play and read stories, while Kai's grandmother would tell them tales of the Snow Queen. The Snow Queen was a woman who was ruler of snow and winter, who would appear where snow gathered most. Just as bees had a ruler, she would say, the Snow Queen was ruler of snow bees, or rather snowflakes that looked like bees. They were her guardians and protectors. Kai was sitting in the window one day when he saw the Snow Queen herself, who beckoned him to her. Afraid, he backed away from the window until she was gone. Though later, on a warm summer's day, a breeze picked up and blew shattered pieces of the mirror into Kai's heart and eyes, causing him to see only as he would, as if looking through the mirror. Everything became distorted and evil and bad. He smashed apart the garden he tended with Gerda and insulted his grandmother, as he no longer saw any good in the world. He left them both heartbroken and confused. The only thing that was beautiful to Kai now were the snow bees. The following winter, Kai took his sled out to the snowy market square to play, as all the children would do. He hitched his sled to the beautiful white carriage of the Snow Queen, who was disguised as a woman in a heavy white coat. Once they were outside of the border of the city, the Snow Queen revealed herself to Kai and kissed him twice. Once to numb him from the cold, a second time to make him forget Gerda, his family, and his life before. A third kiss would kill him. She then took Kai to her palace outside of the city to keep him for herself. The people of the town assumed that Kai had died when they couldn't find him. They assumed that he'd fallen into a river and drowned, and did not look for him any further. Gerda, heartbroken over the disappearance of her friend, went to search for Kai alone. She offered her new red shoes to the river in exchange for Kai. But when the river didn't take her shoes as a gift, she learnt that the river had never taken Kai. So Gerda travelled further and visited the home of a lonely witch. This witch had a garden of eternal summer and wanted Gerda to live with her forever. So she made Gerda forget about Kai, and knowing that the roses in her garden would remind Gerda of her friend, she made them all sink beneath the earth. A while later, forgetting the roses herself, the witch entered the garden with Gerda, wearing a rose on her hat. Gerda saw the rose on the witch's hat and remembered her dear friend Kai. Gerda's tears fell upon the ground, and a rose bush beneath the earth rose up and told her that while it was below, it could see all the dead of the earth, and that Kai was not among them. Gerda fled the witch's home and came across a crow who told her that Kai had been taken to the Snow Queen's palace. Gerda began her journey to a nearby palace, but upon arriving there, she found only a prince and princess. She told the couple of her story, and they prepared her a beautiful coach and warm clothes. Gerda was caught on her travels by a band of robbers, of which there was a little girl. Gerda befriended the little robber girl, whose pet doves told her they saw Kai being carried away by the Snow Queen to Lapland. The robber gave Gerda her reindeer, who had come from Lapland, and would be able to take her there, and together they went. Along the way, they stopped at the Lapp woman's home and at the Finn woman's home. The Finn woman told the reindeer that the secret to saving Kai rested in Gerda's heart. She said, "I can give her no greater power than she has already. Don't you see how strong that is? How men and animals are obliged to serve her, and how well she has got through the world, befooted as she is. She cannot receive any power from me greater than she has now, her own purity and innocence of heart." Gerda finally reached the Snow Queen's palace and was halted by the snow bees that guard it. She said the Lord's Prayer, and her breath took the shape of angels who resisted the snow bees and allowed Gerda to enter the palace. Gerda found Kai frozen on a river called the Mirror of Reason, upon which the Snow Queen's throne sat. The Snow Queen herself was absent. Kai had been given pieces of ice to form a word that the Snow Queen told him to spell. If he was able to spell it, she would release him from her power and gift him a new pair of skates. Gerda ran to Kai and kissed him. The warmth of her heart and her tears burnt away the splinters of mirror in Kai's heart. Kai himself began to cry, which cleared the shards of mirror from his eyes and released him from his curse. He recognized Gerda immediately, and they began to dance in joy, rearranging the shards of ice on the river. Together they fell down, tired from dancing, and in the ice was spelled the word eternity, the very word that Kai needed to spell to be freed. Kai and Gerda escaped the palace, and with the help of the reindeer and the friends they'd made along the way, made their way back home. Upon returning, they saw that nothing in town had changed but themselves. They'd grown. Kai's grandmother then closes the tale with a passage from the Bible. "Assuredly, I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." Fairy tales often have a theme of good defeating evil, a nice break from what tends to happen in our own reality. Whether they serve to provide moral guidance or simply entertainment, a reader can always take something away from a fairy tale. I couldn't find any law or related cases that may have inspired the Snow Queen, as I'm sure you can tell it's one of the more fantastical fairy tales. Though the fairy tale has been adapted in film, TV and theatre, the most popular adaptation I'm sure every parent is familiar with is Frozen, which takes the Snow Queen and takes her from evil to misunderstood. The story remains, though, that a person can be saved by love. While love may not cure everything, it can help free someone from isolation. That's definitely something that we can all apply to real life. I hope you enjoyed this telling of the Snow Queen. I'm sure it's a little bit different than my usual fairy tale retellings, but I kind of enjoyed researching this one, as like I said, I wasn't particularly familiar with this story beforehand. Let me know if there are any other fairy tales that you would like to hear me cover, and I'll be sure to add them to the list. Stay tuned to hear from another podcast, which I highly recommend to you. And if you want to support me in any way, feel free to follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at goodnightmare_s. You can rate, subscribe, or review my podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you have any suggestions for cases, fairy tales, or strange and spooky happenings, feel free to email me at goodnightmare_s@outlook.com. Until next time, sweet dreams.
Hey there, it's Allison Carter. I'm the host of the podcast, Not Your Little Lady. Each episode features a woman living in the South outside of socially accepted norms. Listen and relate as these women share stories about obstacles they faced and how it feels to come out on the other side. We talk about things that pissed us off, the booze we like to drink, and historical women who have made a difference. Through all this, we explore the importance of women owning their past, present, and future while keeping it light and funny. You can find episodes, which are released every other Wednesday, on most podcast listening apps or at notyourlittlelady.com. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at ladiesofnyll and on Facebook and Instagram at notyourlittlelady. Happy listening, y'all.